Before we get to that specific verse, we need to remind ourselves of the context of this particular verse. It's Paul writing to the community in Corinth and offering them the image of the body of Christ. Paul writes these words, "Indeed, the body does not consist of one member, but of many." And he talks about different parts of the body. It's a great passage, and I'm sure many of us are familiar with it. The image of the body of Christ. It recognises that there are many different parts. And for me, I think the passage speaks to the African proverb, "The left hand washes the right hand, and the right hand washes the left hand." And we've seen that this week, haven't we, in Germiston in particular. And as I look at you, some of you have already told me that you've got tired bodies because of all the work that you've been engaged in and the different activities this week. Different parts of the body working together. This week, for me, we've seen the church at its very best. We've seen people working hard administratively, people working hard in the kitchen, people moving chairs, people having meetings, taxis, etc. It's a beautiful image of the church at its best. I want to focus on one verse that I've been asked to share something on. I confess it's not the easiest of verses, to be honest. Here we are celebrating something, and the verse is actually talking about suffering. It reads as follows: "If one member suffers, all suffer together with it. If one member is honoured, all rejoice together with it." If one member suffers, all suffer. If one member is honoured, all honour that together. And I think this is the simple invitation. We are called to suffer with one another, and we are called to rejoice with one another. If we focus on the suffering part for a moment, I'll start with the bad news. We don't want to suffer, do we? Who here wants to suffer and experience pain? What we often do is actually flee from it because we don't want to be in the dark space. I wonder if for those who said yes to a life of discipleship and a life of following Christ, that we would be choosing to suffer. That's what the verse is saying, that we choose to suffer. I think it's what we call costly discipleship. I think it's what we call take up your cross and follow me. And for each of us that will be different. It will mean different things as we take up our cross. It reminded me, this verse, of Oscar Romero. If you don't know, he's recently been beatified as a saint. Oscar Romero was martyred in March 1980. And he was someone who was a voice for the voiceless. And he spoke out on behalf of his soul. When I learn how our people are tortured, when I learn how the rights of those created in the image of God are violated. He suffered, he literally suffered at the hands of those who tortured him. When he died, he was at a table similar to this. I had the privilege of seeing it on a visit to El Salvador a number of years ago. And he stood and he broke bread for the community. And somebody came in at the back of the church and shot him whilst that was happening. That's suffering.